What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan from Atlas AVL, and I'm here today to show you the ropes for how to be an audio engineer here at Highpoint Church. So here we are on stage here at the church. So over here on stage right, we've got acoustic guitar, and there are two what's called DI boxes that the acoustic guitar plugs into. If they're not plugged in here, you won't get them on the right channels of the board. So it's important that you get them plugged in here. So this first acoustic plugs into this guy right here, this gold DI box. A DI box takes a signal that is instrument level, like an acoustic guitar, and changes it to something that's mic level that a soundboard and PA speakers can use. So that's what those boxes are for. So you've got acoustic 1 shows up in this DI box. And over here, there's another DI box for a second acoustic guitar player. So if you have a second one, make sure they plug into this blue one. And make sure when they plug in, on the front of it, there's input and through. You want to make sure that they plug into input. Through is like going into another DI box or something like that. If you needed to do something, you guys won't need to do anything fancy like that. So make sure you take your input sources like an acoustic guitar, in this case, acoustic 2, and plug it into the one that says input. And it will show up on the soundboard where it's supposed to. Over here, we have our vocal microphones. So we have mics 1, 2, and 3 over here. They are labeled incorrectly at the moment, but they will be labeled correctly at some point. These 3 microphones show up as mic 1, 2, and 3 on the soundboard. So your vocalists, they'll have these. And then you want to make sure when your vocalists are holding their microphones that they hold them nice and close to their mouth like this. They're not holding it down here. They're not waving it around like a magic wand, like they're trying to do something. You want to have them right here, so it's nice and clean, nice and crisp sound that you're able to work with at front of house to make it sound like it needs to in the context of everybody playing together. Over here, we have a station right now that is for the flute. So this is mic, it says mic 1. Mic 1 right now is the flute microphone. It's called flute on the soundboard. And it shows up right here. So whoever's playing the flute can play right into that microphone, and it works great. Sounds great. Then over here we've got our keys. Keys are any keyboard sounds that the keyboard player may be using. And there's some DI boxes down here. One of them over here is for the pads. So the pads right now, I believe they are sent from a computer, or you could send them on an iPad, anything with your typical headphone jack that's playing a pad sound, you can use that. And so that goes into this DI box and then shows up on the pads on the soundboard. The keys go into these DI boxes and show up on the keys of the console. Over here, we've got a drum set. And I want you to follow me into this dark cave, Sammy. This drum set over here has a bunch of microphones on it, and it's super important that they're in the right spot or you'll have trouble with the drummer and getting things to sound right. So we want our snare drum microphone to be pointed straight across the snare where this little lever is that makes the snare wires connect to the drum. So you want it pointing straight across in that direction. These tom microphones you want pointed kind of right in between where they hit and the edge of the drum, kind of like they are right now. You just want to get them kind of pointed in that general direction. And if you do that, your drums will sound great. Over here we have the station where the bass guitar plays. We've got this awesome Fender Jazz bass with the nice 70s finish on it. Looks really cool. That plugs into this DI box. Now this DI box is a little special because it does a lot of processing to get the bass to sound really nice. So on this DI box, it's called a tone hammer. It's made by Aguilar. And it's got these switches on it that turn these lights on. So these settings, take a screenshot of that. That will help the bass to sit right in the mix and sound nice. You want both of these lights on, and you want the knob set somewhere around there. Bass goes into the input, and it comes out, goes into this box, and goes to the back of the stage. It's all working, and you shouldn't have to do anything to it, but that's where the bass plugs in. So that is how the bass works. And then backstage, if you follow me back here, we've got our rack where there's the system processor and all sorts of fun things that aren't really being used at the moment. So back here, there's nothing to turn on. There's a lot to clean up. And I would encourage you guys to keep the backstage that you have really clean and really organized. What we have is a rack unit with all these wires and all this stuff. And way back here in the corner, I don't know if you can see this, but we have a box that is the system processor. Now this file is saved to preset 30, Highpoint Community Church, Atlas AVL. Now this preset won't change and will always be on when you turn on the system. But if for any reason things sound really bad and like something's broken, you can go, you can hit recall, preset 30, Highpoint Community Church, Atlas AVL, and your sound system will be back to where we set it, or it'll be zeroed out. This is where all of the cables on stage plug into these units, and the soundboard is connected to these units. You shouldn't ever have to get back here, but if you want to know where the inputs from the soundboard are, they're back here. This top one is where input 1 starts, so input 1 through 16 are through 1 through 16. 17 through 32 are 1 through 16 on the bottom unit. So this is the front of house booth here at Highpoint. Why don't you come on up here and I'll show you what's what. So over here we have lighting. Now, lighting has a checklist of things that you can do, and the team here already knows what they're doing with that. So I'm not going to go over lighting in this video, but they can answer any questions you have about that. This computer right here, this Mac Mini that's inside here, is also what controls ProPresenter, which sends all of its audio, whether it be pre or post service music or videos during the service. It comes from this computer. Then we have the sound console. The sound console is where you'll be doing all of the work mixing and managing all of the different audio sources here on a Sunday. Then we have Video Village over here. This is where the video team makes sure the broadcast is working, they check the cameras, and they make sure the live stream is looking great every Sunday. Let's focus on audio because that's what we're training you on today. So when you first get here and the board turns on, I'll turn it on now, you'll see it does this nice little Star Wars kind of looking boot up sequence. It comes on and it says, do you wish to recall your user scene? Every time that the board turns on, you want to do this. You want to hit yes. What does that do? That loads the Atlas AVL default scene that we are leaving you with today, so that anything that might have changed in the file, maybe someone was adjusting something for that particular week, we want to make sure that that change doesn't stay permanent over time, or everything will start drifting every week and it'll start sounding different and you won't know why, because it'll be a lot of little changes that have added up over time. So we want to bring ourselves back to the default before we start every time we mix. You can get to the scenes if you hit no by hitting scenes, and scene 1 is the Atlas AVL default. If you want to store your own scene, you can store your own scene with changes that you've made by hitting a blank spot and hitting store. Then you can hit this pencil and you can name it. Say, my name was Bob and I really liked my mix and I wanted to start with my own file every, time with a different reverb. I could write Bob mix. Okay, and I can go there. If I wanted to load the Bob Mix file from the current Atlas AVL default file, I would select the Bob Mix and hit recall go. Hit yes, and it recalls Bob Mix. I'm going to delete the Bob Mix show file because we don't need it. And I'm going to go back to our Atlas AVL default. So that's how the console will open up. There's some other settings on here, but you don't need to worry about those settings because we've taken care of them for you. There are a couple buttons over here on the left-hand side that are the layer buttons. And they're what we use to navigate all the different sources and faders on the console. Layer A is where you'll spend most of your time, which is this top layer here that we're on. Layer A has your kick drum mics, both 1 and 2. Kick drum 1 is an inside kick mic. Kick drum 2 is an outside kick mic. You can turn both of them on and off and see how they impact the tone. The inside one sounds a little brighter, and the outside one has a little bit more low end, and you can mix them and blend them to taste. Then we have snare 1 and snare 2. This is a mic on the snare drum on the top of it, and this is a mic on the bottom of the snare drum that helps it sound nice and sizzly. You can mess with those bounces, but they're set the way in the file that sound pretty good. Then we have our tom microphones. Tom 1 is the little rack tom. Tom 2 is the big floor tom. And then we have an overhead left and right microphone that are picking up the whole drum kit and the cymbals above the drum kit. Following that, we have our bass guitar. So the bass shows up there. Acoustic 1, which is labeled AC1 on this file because you can't write the word acoustic. So you have acoustic 1, acoustic 2, and then we have 3 faders that aren't being used at the moment, but could be used if you wanted to plug into those inputs later. Right now they're labeled for electric guitar because that would be a common instrument that you might want to add to your worship team. So you have electric 1, electric 2, and electric 3. Following that, we have the inputs from the keys. So the piano shows up here. Then we have the pad, left and right. And that pad is the one that plugs into that aux cable that you use. And with the pad, I would encourage you to play with the level in different moments because sometimes the pad, it's playing the same thing the whole time. And sometimes bringing it down and bringing it up can really help the different moments of the service not feel so stagnant. Bringing it down in a quiet moment and up in a loud moment can really help fill out the space nice. After the pad, we have the input for the flute. You'll notice that's the end of the green inputs. So the green inputs are all of the instruments for worship band. Then we have these yellow inputs. These are all of the microphones that you have at the church. You have mic 1, mic 2, and mic 3. That's what your singers would use on the worship team on a Sunday or an event. And then we have one called Speak, which is this handheld microphone right here. And then we have one called Pastor, and that is Pastor Andy's lapel mic, which we affectionately refer to as junk. As of right now, as of the filming of this video. It's due for an upgrade, and we're all excited about that upgrade when it happens in the future. Moving on to layer B, we have some blue inputs. Now, these blue inputs are inputs you don't really ever have to touch. They just kind of have to be there. So the first 2 blue inputs are the crowd mics. We have 2 crowd mics way up high in the ceiling. You're probably not gonna be able to see them from over here, but they're way up there and they're picking up the crowd. That really helps add a sense of being in the room when you're on live stream. So we like to use those, and they stay at Unity. They're just kind of always on the live stream in the background. Next to that, we have a blue one called Music. Now it's called Music right now, and you can rename that to something that maybe your team finds a little bit more clear as you go on. So to rename it, you would select the channel, and then in this main processing window, you just tap the name Music, and then tap it again right up here. And when you do that, it should open up the name, and you can type the name, and when you're done, you just hit X. So you tap the name, you make the changes, and you hit the X, or you hit apply if you've made changes. I didn't make any, so it doesn't let me hit apply. So music is any sound coming from the computer that plays Pro Presenter. That computer, once again, is right next to the soundboard. So if you turn that up, you hear music when music's playing, like that. So that's what you'll use for pre-service music, post-service music, and any videos that happen during the service. Next to that, you have these white ones. These are what's called effects returns, and these will be named plate, hall, delay, and chorus, which these correspond to the 4 effects that you can put on different sounds. So this is the volume of those effects overall. You shouldn't have to touch these because we use the effects sends to put reverb, delay, or chorus on our instruments. So to put reverb on a vocal, we would go to layer A, and we would find the vocal, and we would hit the effect that we want, 1, 2, 3, or 4, which are our 2 reverbs. So reverb 1 is what we use on the drums. Reverb 2 is what we use on the band and vocals. 3 is our delay, and 4 is our chorus. So if we wanted to add some of our hall reverb, which is effect number 2, to our vocals, we hit hall reverb, which is effects number 2, and all the faders move. And you can see how much reverb we have on these different inputs. If we wanted more reverb on mic 2, we would just turn the reverb up, and then we would go back to our main mix right here. And now mic 2 has more reverb. Speaking of our main mix over here and all of these mix selects, this is how you get to your effects mixes and your live stream mix, which is mix 1, and your main mix, which is left, right. So for your live stream mix, a very common problem that you might have is that you realize that the volume of something in the room sounds really great, but maybe online, that same thing doesn't always sound like it's at the right volume. We can make an adjustment to that live stream level on mix 1. So you have all of these input faders, and you have this final fader that says master. This is the master volume for the mix that you have selected on these buttons. So if we were to say, have music playing, and turn the master down for the left-right mix, we have no sound out of the sound system unless we had that fader up. And you can hear music comes on. Let's turn that music off and put that back to 0. On live stream, if we hit mix 1, this master now becomes the master for the live stream. So this is the overall volume of the live stream. And these faders become the level offset, I should say, to the live stream. And what I mean by level offset, and you might have to rewind this part of the video and watch it a couple times to really get it, because it can be a little confusing. It was for me at first. But basically, when you're on this main mix, which is what you hear in the room, and you make adjustments to the faders, whatever mix 1 is set to is an offset of the changes that happen on the main mix. So if everything on the live stream is at 0, which we can do just like that, so it's a full copy, with the exception of our cymbal mics, usually you want less of those. If it's all at 0, then whatever these faders are set to, it's a 1-to-1 copy on this mix. Say all of these were at 0. Then all of these would be at 0 as well. But if I were to take all of my drums and turn them down to -5, they're still at 0 on the live stream, but they're still at -5 because it's following. Now, where that gets useful for us is if we need to make an adjustment to the live stream. So with all of our faders at 0, super common, problems that we might come across is the speaking mic needs to be louder on the live stream than it is in the room, because we can get away with a lower volume in the room, but we might need a louder volume online. So if the speaking mic is at 0 and everything's working like it should, we can go to live stream, which is mix 1, and offset that by 5 or 10 decibels. 10 decibels usually works for that case. Now what this means is that no matter where this fader is in the mix for our main mix, it's going to follow that value but add 10 to the live stream. So if we were to turn our speaking mic down 10 on our main mix and our live stream was up 10, then it's sending at 0 on our stream. If we were to go to -20 on our main mix, then it's -10. So it's relative to whatever the values are set at for our main mix. It follows them, and this adds an offset, which is why we want to start and build the file, or this soundboard's way of working, at 0. Now that we've done an overview of some of the buttons on the mixer surface itself, let's get into some more of the philosophical and technical details of how this mixer works. So the way we've set up the show file, or the scene, depending on where you're from, that you might have called it something different, that just means the way that this console is set up by us, the integrators, to work is with all the faders at 0 on our main mix, and our input gain, which we'll get to in a minute, set correctly, your mix should sound pretty good. It should sound balanced, it should sound nice, and live stream should be working. So when I talk about gain, what am I talking about? I like to talk about gain and think of it as the volume of things before they hit my volume control. So how loud or how quiet are they coming into the soundboard at? What is their starting volume? You can also think of it as water pressure, like with a hose. You don't always want the highest water pressure. If the water pressure is too high, you're going to destroy your petunias the moment you turn your hose on. But if it's too low, it's not going to travel as far as you want and do what you're expecting the hose to do. So what I like to do, and I will use this speaking mic as an example. So if our speaking mic is unmuted and you hit this button right here that says PAFL, this makes this meter right here show you the volume of the channel as it's coming in to the console. And what we want, our goal for healthy gain, is to be right around halfway on the meter on anything that's not drums. Anything that's drums, we want at +12 on the meter, almost all the way up. We don't really want the red lights on, but we want just below the red lights on because of how drums work. When a microphone is on a drum kit, the meter will show us the level of the stick hitting the drum, not the level of the sound the drum is making. So what we do is we hit this PAFL button, and now you can see while I talk, it's nice and healthy. It's about halfway up the meter where it says 0. And if I get a little loud, it goes into the yellow every now and then. That is healthy gain. And so if your channels are coming in at that gain level, then it's going to sound great if I turn this up to 0. And you can hear the mic is on in the house, nothing's feeding back, and it sounds natural because it's right up to my mouth. This is good mic technique with healthy gain structure, and that helps. One of the reasons we need healthy gain is because we have processors that we have that are called dynamic processors. Things like what's called a gate or a compressor. Gates automatically mute audio for us of open microphones so that we don't have to. And then compressors automatically turn signals down when they get too loud so that we don't have to. Now, dynamic processors work because they have a component to them called a threshold. That threshold determines at what point it either mutes the audio or turns it down if it's too loud. Let's take a second and look at the example of a gate. So if we hit this button right here, which says with this straight line, that opens up our gate. You can get to it with this knob and adjust the threshold. You see this one right here that says threshold moves. You can also adjust any parameter by touching it, and this gold one lights up and you can turn it. Any parameter works like that on the desk. But this one is automatically mapped to the threshold. So let's look at this. So if I speak into this speaking microphone, you can see the signal coming in is healthy. And what we're able to do is roll this gate up until this gate starts closing, which is this red line. And you can see the history. It's automatically muting the microphone when I'm done talking. This is really great because it helps avoid the sound of the room being mic'd when no one's talking, which can increase the risk of feedback for other open microphones. That's an example of a gate. If our gain was set too low, like something like that, where it's not quite high enough, it might cut off my words at certain points while I talk. And when I talk, it might not open unless I'm really loud like that. It might need to be really, really loud, or it's going to mute whoever's talking, and that's going to sound really bad. So what I like to do is have healthy gain, which is right around 0, and you'll see as soon as I start getting it right around 0, it starts opening and closing in a really natural way with how I'm speaking. I can speak quietly and I can speak loud, and it stays open until I'm done. So we need to make sure that our instruments and our vocal mics, again, drums are different. They need to come in at plus 12 on the meter for their gates to work correctly. But everything else comes in right around that 0 point so that any gates that are on the channels work the way we want. Next up, we have compressors, which are this one down here. You also can adjust the compressor's threshold. Now, what's really great about compressors is they do the opposite of a gate. You can see this little line representing volume, and as I lower it, you'll see the red line starts, when I talk loud, it starts to turn it down. This is really great for someone who maybe gets really excited at some times and is really quiet at others. And the way we have it is for it to be set right around the 0 point on the threshold, which is that middle of the meter. So that if someone's talking, it's not turning them down until they get really excited, and then it turns them down. We need to make sure that everything has healthy gain levels, because if our gain was too high, then it's always going to be turning them down, and we're going to have a really hard time hearing the mic. And if it's too low, when they get really loud, it's not going to turn them down. It's going to sound too loud, and it's going to be a distraction. So we have healthy gain, and when we have healthy gain, loud parts get compressed, and quiet parts don't get compressed. Another thing that you might need to adjust as you go through your mixing here at Highpoint is the EQ of an instrument, more specifically a microphone. You'll probably EQ microphones more than anything else. What do I mean by EQ? Think of the bass and treble knobs in your car stereo. So if we hit this button right here, we'll turn on our EQ. And you can see this like graph that it opens up. Think of where it says 500, right in the middle here. Everything to the left of that is our bass. Everything to the right of it is our treble. If you think of that like that, then it helps me to understand what EQ does. So with EQ, we have these 4 different bands, is what they're called, these areas that we can boost or cut the level of that frequency range. And you can get to each of the bands right here. You have your low frequency, your low middle frequency, your high middle frequency, and your high frequency. And then you have a knob called gain. Now, this gain isn't the same as preamp gain. Preamp gain is the level coming into the board. Gain on your EQ is the level of boost or cut of that particular frequency. What do I mean by that? If I hit low frequency and I turn the gain, you'll see the graph boost these frequencies in the lower tone area. If I go negative, it cuts those frequencies. This can help adjust the sound of someone who sounds too muddy or has too much bass in their voice. And each one of these is at different points. I've preset them to points that are really useful for any microphone. So this one is right in the middle. It can help if something sounds kind of honky. This one's nice and bright at the top. This can help if something sounds harsh or sounds too loud, but it's not a volume issue. This high mid, this blue one right here, you can dump a little bit of that out and it'll sound nice and smooth. And then this high frequency one will let you boost the highs or cut the highs. If someone has a lot of S's in their mic, you can cut some of the highs and that will help solve that problem. So that's EQ. I highly encourage you to experiment with the EQ and see what different things do. For example, in this, I'll use this low middle frequency as an example because it's easy to see because it's blue. If I were to boost this frequency knob moves the frequency of the boost. And this width knob, you can see changes. Do I want to affect more frequencies or less frequencies? Just that specific one or also the ones around it. I have it preset for you in areas that are useful, but you can play with that and see how it sounds. And lastly, the last thing I want to go over are these buttons in the very middle of the console. So these red ones are your mutes. So if you hit that, you will mute or unmute that particular channel in the mix and online. And this green one is select. So if you hit select, you'll notice it pulls up the channel with all of the processing with it. So you can see at a quick glance if your gates are working, your compressors are working, or if there's EQ on the channel. And then underneath of that is your PAFL. Now that's a fancy abbreviation for pre or after fader listen, which is also just a fancy way to say this is what I want to listen to in my headphones. So if you hit this, it will send whatever is gold to the headphones that are next to you at front of house. And there's a volume control for those headphones right there. Now that can be really, really useful if you just want to hear something. If you hear something on the acoustic guitar and it sounds kind of funny, you can hit this button. You can turn the headphones, I would keep it down, put the headphones on and bring it up because you don't want to blow your ears out if it's too loud. And you can double check, is there something going on that I'm having trouble hearing in the room? And you can maybe make an adjustment to try and deal with that. Maybe it's an EQ thing, maybe it's too muddy and you can pull out some low frequencies, or it's too bright, you can pull out some high frequencies. And then you can undo it and listen to unsolo it, I should say, not undo it. And then you can listen to your changes and see if you've made an improvement. What's really nice is that when you hit this PAFL button, the desk also automatically selects that channel and goes to it for you. And I think they do this because the intention is, well, if you're going to solo a channel, it's probably because you might want to make a change to it. So it brings it up for you. So if you wanted to EQ your mic 2, for example, you could listen to mic 2, listen to it in your headphones for a second, go, it sounds too muddy, I need to cut lows. And then all you do on this green one that's highlighted is hit your EQ, grab your lows, and cut some lows. And you've made that change and you can move on to the next activity that you have in your mix. And if you want to listen to your main mix as a whole, you can not select or unselect any of these inputs, and you'll notice the master automatically gets sent to the headphones. Now, if you hit mix 1, which is online, your live stream, then it automatically solos your live stream and you can hear them in the headphones as well. So once again, if we were soloing mic 2 because we were listening to it and we unsoloed it, it will automatically solo our masters. And if we want to check online in the middle of service to see if you can hear the vocals, you can hit mix 1 and you're listening to online. And then you can hit mix left, right, and you're back to listening to what's getting sent to the speakers. This can be really useful to hear the difference between how the mix actually sounds versus how it sounds in the room and how it sounds online, and how those two things might differ from each other and how to get the best result that's going to work for both of those locations. Come to practice and try out all these things I was talking about. And I think you'll find that you're able to worship from this console in a very unique way, and you'll be able to serve your leadership with what God is telling them to do very well. Well, that's everything that you need to know to be an effective audio tech here at Highpoint using the Allen and Heath soundboard that you guys have here. I encourage you to watch this video over and over again, rewind it if you need to, and really digest all the things that we talked about. I know it can be a lot and it can be overwhelming, but I promise if you keep putting the time in and you keep practicing, you'll get the hang of it, and you'll really enjoy being an audio tech here at Highpoint.